On today's show, the Houston Rockets beating the Chicago Bulls 133-118 behind 85 combined points from the trio of Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, and Alperen Sengun. Jalen Green was huge in the first half. Kevin Porter Jr. brought the game home in the second half, and Alperen Sengun was dominant over the entirety of the game. What were the Rockets doing to make the offense so smooth in this game? What were they changing? What was different about this game? What did Stephen Silas do with the rotations to help win this game in the second half? We're going to break it all down for you coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays, host of the State of the Rockets podcast, as well as Rockets Watch. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, where you can help the show out tremendously by commenting anything below. What a win by the Houston Rockets. They stop the losing streak and they pick up a dub in a really impressive way against the Chicago Bulls, 133-118. We're going to break down all the different angles from this Rockets win. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. This was easily the best game ever, I think, between Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, and Alperen Sengun. That trio, the best game that those three have ever played together. The way that they played in this game, their combined 85 points was spectacular. And especially in the second half, right? The Rockets trailed in this game. They trailed, at halftime by a little bit after, God, Zach LaVine threw up a prayer at halftime, had no business going in. But this game is the perfect encapsulation example of how the template should be for this Houston Rockets team to find success with all three of Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Kevin Porter Jr. KPJ was phenomenal in this game, leading the charge in the second half. 36 points, 14 of 22 shooting, 6 of 12 from long distance, 2 of 4 at the charity stripe, had 7 boards, 9 assists, only 2 turnovers. He was flirting with a triple-double. Jalen Green was phenomenal in the first half, kind of, quieted down a little bit there in the second half, but he was the offensive spark that the Rockets needed in the first half. He had 24 points on 9 of 15 shooting, 6 of 10 from long range, had 6 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, no turnovers for Jalen Green. And then the big man in the middle, Alperen Sengun himself, 25 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, 1 steal, 2 blocks, did have 4 turnovers, but was 10 of 12 from the floor. Didn't miss any shots until the second half and was 4 of 4 at the free throw line, including draining a three-pointer.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
I mean, this was such an incredible game from the Rockets' big three. I put the poll out. Somebody had to win Locked On Rockets player of the game, and the honor goes to Kevin Porter Jr. in this one. He had 24 second half points. He had 15 points in the fourth quarter. He completely took the game over down the stretch. And I want to talk about a little bit of the game flow, some of what was going on in the first half, the huge run that the Rockets went on there in the third quarter to create a little bit of distance and get out ahead of the Chicago Bulls and really take control of the reins in the second half. But for Kevin Porter Jr. in this game, this was, I think this was his best game of the season. Yeah. In fact, I feel pretty confident in saying this was Kevin Porter Jr.'s best game of the season. And it was for a couple different reasons. One, he and Alperen Sengun are developing chemistry, and it feels like it's taken way too long for this to happen, but it's nice to finally see it happening, because it feels like Alpe's had chemistry with Jalen Green, and it feels like even Alpe's had chemistry with, Eric Gordon and so many other guys on the roster, KJ Martin, Josh Christopher from, going back to last season. And it's been such a head scratcher as to why KPJ and Sengun, I should say, haven't really been on the same page so much of this season. This game, those two connected so often, right? KPJ was hitting Alpe on the roll, going to the rim. He was getting Alpe the ball on, in post-up opportunities. Alpe was kicking the ball back out to Kevin Porter Jr. for wide open three-pointers. Those two really felt like they were feeding off of one another in this game in a way that I don't think we've ever really seen before. And it was just really, really nice to see that, and that unselfish level of play kind of starting at the top with KPJ and Jalen, and then bleeding into guys like Alperen Sengun and Eric Gordon and Jabari Smith Jr., and then the bench unit with KJ Martin and Tari and Oos. And the ball movement for the Rockets in this game was truly incredible. They had 28 assists on 50 made shots. I'll take that. That's a great number for compared to how this Rockets team usually handles the basketball, and how frustrating it can be sometimes to see the ball get kind of sticky and guys not really sharing the basketball and becoming a little tunnel visioned, a little selfish at times. Tonight, this game felt like worlds apart, to where there were so many possessions that maybe it didn't end in a made basket. Maybe it was a missed shot, whatever, but the process, right? The steps from point A to B to C felt really, really good. And that starts with Kevin Porter Jr., who very much kind of let the offense come to him early. He was doing a really good job facilitating early in this game. He was really, focused on getting other guys involved in that first half and not really forcing any of his own offense. And then in the second half, really started to take the game over. And then in the fourth quarter, again, 15 fourth quarter points to close this thing out for the Rockets, including a moment where he and Vucevic had a moment where they were, kind of jawing back and forth a little bit. KPJ took exception to something Vucevic did on the court, and then came down the following offensive possession near the end of the game and got Vucevic on a switch. And you knew he wanted that switch, and he drove in, pulled the ball back, and he had Vucevic. I mean, Vucevic was gone. He straight up cooked him, and then drained the mid-range jumper right after the, beautiful little, crossover finish move. KPJ's season high 36 points. This was best game of the season, arguably his best game since he dropped 50 and 11 on the Bucks. So that should tell you just how impressive this game was. Yes, it's against the Bulls. Yes, the Bulls have been struggling this season, but this is the type of game that you can kind of hopefully build on and be able to look at as the blueprint for this Houston Rockets team and how they should move forward. And not only was it about KPJ's ability to kind of let the offense come to him and getting other guys involved there in the first half and then taking over in the second half, KPJ he played a lot off ball in this game, right? He had opportunities where, Jalen was creating for him, or Alpe was creating for him, or he would be in the initiator in the offense, and then he would relocate elsewhere on the floor after kind of getting things started. And that, to me, is when KPJ is at his best, right? When he's not forcing the issue every single possession where the ball has to be in his hands and he's, forcing up ill-advised shots or tough contested looks, where he really got some of the easiest opportunities that he's gotten all season. Wide open three-point shots, catch and shoot opportunities, moments where he was catching the ball on the perimeter and being able to attack off the catch instead of having to try and get going downhill in the pick and roll and make something happen out of that. So it really felt like he had a diverse offensive game and a lot of opportunities to really flourish in this one. So your Locked on Rockets player of the game goes to Kevin Porter Jr., although honorary nod towards Alperen Sengun, who had a monster game. I want to talk more about Alpe's huge night, Jalen Green's big game, and, the unfortunate, waned a little bit there in the second half, but still a very, very strong game for Jalen Green. I want to talk about the flow of this game a little bit. We're going to get there, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Next game, I'm taking Jalen Green to score more than 24.5 points. How about Kevin Porter Jr.? We'll take the over on 7.5 assists. What about Alperen Sengun? We'll take more than 8.5 rebounds. That seems like a pretty safe bet at this point. And how about Jabari Smith Jr.? Maybe we'll go under on 4.5 threes. That seems a bit much. So what is Prize Picks, right? How does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, NFL, NHL, PGA, you name it. They've got you covered over at Prize Picks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that simple. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. Here's the best part. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON and sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, appreciate you for making LOR your first listen. Make sure to go check out Locked On Sports today for your second listen. The biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Now, the game flow of this one was, I'll tell you what, by the end of the first half, when the first half buzzer sounded, I did not feel good about this game for the Rockets. I mean, look, they came out roaring out of the gate early. At one point, they led 23-5 in the first quarter against the Bulls. They came out firing on all cylinders. Jalen Green was super hot early in the first quarter. And it kind of looked like the Rockets were just going to absolutely crush the Bulls. And then the Bulls, finally woke up. It's like they got to the game 6 minutes late. I don't know. And they wound up finishing the first quarter with only down 10, which the way things, as good as the Rockets played in the first quarter, you're kind of looking at the score and you're like, okay, you're only up by 10. What's going to happen now? And sure enough, the Bulls then hung 39 points on the Rockets in the second quarter and managed to go into halftime leading by 1. They had all the momentum, right? The Bulls had all the momentum after the first half in this game. And so top of the third quarter, things are feeling a little unsteady. And if you're the Rockets, you're like, all right, all the momentum is in Chicago's favor right now. You got to come out and answer at the top of the third quarter with something strong, or you're going to get blown out here at the top. And that's basically what it felt like. Is the Rockets, DeMar DeRozan opened with a quick bucket to start the half. Jabari Smith Jr. hit a quick 3 off of an assist from Jalen Green, and we're all knotted up at 67 apiece. Then the Bulls reeled off 7 points in a row to take a 74-67 lead, and credit to Stephen Silas. He called timeout, right? He saw that the guys needed to be regrouped to calm down a little bit, to gather themselves. And out of that timeout, coming back in, about 9.5 minute mark of the third quarter, Rockets have only had 1 bucket in the quarter to this point. Some missed shots, turnover, all that. They reel off a 17-1 run after that timeout. It started with a pair of free throws for Eric Gordon, and then they had a series of just this series of buckets in a row. They had a couple dunks by Alperen Sengun, one of them set up by Kevin Porter Jr. right under the bucket. Then they had the really weird Alp dunk where he kind of dunked it, but the ball hit off back iron and went really up above the backboard and then dropped in, and it counted, got the and one, nailed the free throw. Then you had a couple Jabari Smith Jr. putbacks, which was really impressive to see, for his night. We talk about the big 3 in this game, but even Jabari, as far as along with the other starters, had a really solid performance. He had 13 points on 6 of 14 shooting. Despite just being 1 of 6 from behind the 3-point line, he was 5 of 8 inside the arc, including those couple putbacks that I mentioned there. He had 8 boards, 3 of them being on the offensive glass, 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks, only 1 turnover. A really solid night of production for Jabari Smith Jr. Some really good defensive possessions too, where he was just, everywhere on some of these defensive possessions, right? Switching between guys, switching from DeRozan to Levine, just kind of bouncing all around defensively, trying to, be wherever he needed to be, making, recovery plays, that kind of thing. So just a really solid night for Jabari Smith Jr. But then they keep this run going, right? So they have the Jabari Smith Jr. putbacks. Then Alperen Sengun gets an absolute poster dunk over the course of this 17-1 run. And then to cap things off, Jabari Smith Jr., gets, taps a pass, gets a steal, gets it out to Jalen Green, and Jalen Green's running this fast break and has KPJ running the wing and lobs it up to Kevin, and Kevin is able to barely control the lob pass, dunks the ball. Not even really a dunk. It's like he threw it into the rim, right? So very little contact with the rim on that lob pass. But that capped off this 17-1 run by the Rockets to give them an 84-75 lead. And from that point, the Bulls hit a couple more buckets, kind of cut it to, within 5, but the Rockets were able to, kind of batten down the hatches and hang in there. And they basically, pushed the lead back out to a 10-point lead, 91-81, and then really gave themselves a big cushion off of an Alperen Sengun 3-pointer, which is only his 5th 3 of the season. But, Kevin Porter Jr. kicks the pass back out to Alp. Alp lines up the 3, drains it, and the Rockets are now leading 94-81. From that point, the Rockets basically were able to kind of not quite coast to the finish line, but they were firmly in control of this game from that point on, never really having to look back. And what really impressed me in this game was the kind of game management by Stephen Silas, right? Like I mentioned, the timeout to kind of stop the bleeding when the Bulls went on that 7-0 run, and the Rockets were able to respond in a big way after that timeout. And then the decision-making, the rotation pattern there in the second half, I thought really stood out. First off, back-to-back games, Ty Washington in place of Daishen Nix, a nice development there, so credit to Silas for that. But then on top of that, right, in the first half, we see, Alperen Sengun's having a really strong opening game, opening quarter, looks really good early, sits about 7 minutes into the first quarter. Garuba comes in, and you're doing the weird, the 3-man center rotation, right? Where Garuba gets his 5 or 6 minutes, and then Bruno gets his, 4 or 5 minutes, and then Sengun comes back in. But by the time Sengun checked back in the first half, he had been sitting down for like 12 minutes straight. So he basically winds up only getting 13 first half minutes, which is ridiculous given his production and how good he looked, and the fact that the Rockets were rolling with him on the floor early. So credit to Stephen Silas, who saw how good the Rockets looked during that run and how productive they were being and how things looked. And he let Alperen Sengun play 11 minutes straight. Alp basically played, pretty much that entire third quarter. Didn't sub out until a minute and a half left in the quarter was when Garuba came back in. And when that happened, I thought in my head, I was like, oh man, Garuba's going to play his like 4 or 5 minutes, and then we're still going to get like 3 or 4 minutes of Bruno Fernando in the fourth quarter, and Alp's not going to check back in until like the 4 or 5 minute mark left in the game. That didn't happen. Garuba played his minutes, and then Alp and KPJ checked back into the game with like 8-ish or so minutes left to go. There in the fourth quarter, the Bulls kind of, started to make a little bit of a push for things, started to kind of, get back into it a little bit to where you kind of thinking, okay, is this where is this where the Rockets really, start to let go of things a little bit? Are they going to let the Bulls back into the game? And thankfully it never got closer than I think a 9-point lead. Yeah. 109-100 is when Sengun and KPJ both check back into the game. So a little under 9 minutes left to go. And then from there, Kevin Porter Jr., that was when the takeover started. He checks back in the fourth, and KPJ, boom, 3-pointer, boom, another 3-pointer, boom, mid-range jumper. 8 straight points by KPJ, and then, at that point, Rockets are leading by 15, and they pretty much, from that point, they're able to kind of coast towards the finish line, and that was kind of all she wrote. So I thought it was just really good game management by Stephen Silas. I thought that he did a good job kind of utilizing timeouts, especially there in the second half, again, to stop the bleeding at the top of the third quarter, and then throughout that second half to make sure guys were fresh, because this was a game where he leaned on the starters heavily in this game, right? You look up and down the starting lineup. Jalen Green played 35 minutes. KPJ played 39 minutes. Eric Gordon played 36 minutes. Alp played 32 minutes, which is above what he usually plays. And so because of that, especially it being the first night of a back-to-back, I thought Stephen Silas did a very good job utilizing some timeouts and, kind of making sure his guys were fresh down the stretch of this game to be able to respond and answer any of the little runs that the Bulls were kind of going on. So game management, credit to Stephen Silas. Very good job in this one. But I do want to talk about Alperen Sengun, Jalen Green, their nights a little bit in more detail, how those two, in addition to Kevin Porter Jr., were able to really kind of feed off of one another offensively and have easily the best game ever between those three guys, where things just look so fluid and they were able to make life easier for one another. Really impressive all-around game from those three. Want to talk about that as well as some of the production off the bench for the Rockets in this one. We're going to get there, but first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis this season. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football, college bowl season, basketball, NFL, you name it, they've got you covered over at BetOnline. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get all of your sports betting info. Right now, you can take a look at BetOnline to see who the odds-on title favorites are for this season in the NBA. Got the Boston Celtics leading the way at plus 350, the Milwaukee Bucks at plus 575, Brooklyn Nets in third place at plus 1,000. Then in fourth place, you got the LA Clippers at plus 1,000 as well. And then rounding out the top five, the Golden State Warriors are plus 1,100. So for all those odds and more, be sure to visit betonline.net to learn more about the trends and action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Looking kind of across the board just at, some of the team statistics from this one, it was really good to see. First off, the Rockets were 50 of 90 from the floor, so they shot a pretty solid 55.6% from the floor, 17 of 44 from three-point range. So despite the fact that Jabari Smith Jr. really struggled from three in this one, Jalen had it going, KPJ had it going, Eric Gordon struggled from this one as well, 1 of 6. LP was shooting a whopping 100% from three. KJ Martin, 0 of 4. So it's like Jalen and KPJ could hit from three, and then nobody else could hit from three. But when your two biggest, your two volume three-point shooters, 12 attempts for KPJ, 10 for Jalen, when those guys are hitting, the Rockets just look really good offensively, right? And we've talked about this. When Jalen and KPJ are both on, the Rockets look incredible, right? And this is a prime example of that type of game where they both had it going in this game. Even still to a lesser extent, right? Jalen had it going in the first half and kind of slipped a little bit there in the second half, but KPJ also had it going in the, was solid in the first half and then really exploded in the second half. So that kind of little, going back and forth and recognizing who has the hot hand and, feeding Jalen early and often in the second half and letting him, be the driving force offensively in the first half, and then going more so towards Kevin Porter Jr. in the second half and allowing him, especially there in that fourth quarter, 15 fourth quarter points to take over down the stretch of this game. That worked really, really well. But how do you make that system work if you've got two dynamic guards who do have some up and down in their game, some inconsistency, right? Where maybe they're hot for like 2 or 3 quarters, but they have that one quarter where they start to kind of, shake a little bit, or they're not, the shots start to miss, whatever, defense is keying in on them. How do you balance that? You balance it with Alperen Sengun, and that's what the Rockets did in this game. It really felt like they did a phenomenal job of involving him in so much of the action offensively, right? Alperen Sengun was doing his usual, operating as a roller, and on top of that, he was operating as a roller, but the guys were actually connecting with him on the roll, right? Like, it's got to be exhausting for Alperen Sengun to have to set 1 million screens a game and then never touch the basketball. Like, that's got to be pretty ridiculous if you know what you're capable of, a player like LP, somebody with all that talent. If you're being reduced to just being a rim running big, a screen setting big, and you're not actually touching the basketball, able to create for others and really tap into what you're good at as a basketball player, that's got to be infuriating. But in this game, the chemistry was there, the awareness from Kevin Porter Jr. He was doing a great job finding LP on the roll, finding him when he got post-up opportunities, swinging the ball back to LP when he had a guy, on the block, and getting him, getting the ball in positions where he could be successful with it. And then LP, by extension, because the guys were doing such a good job finding him, he was being really unselfish with the basketball, right? He had 6 assists in this game, and he was out there just like clowning on kids, having fun, right? The no-look pass that he had to KJ Martin near the end of the game, where he he didn't even like no look towards anybody. Like he wasn't like faking a pass or like trying to like throw the defense off. He just basically did it for style points. Like he just looked away and just bounce pass, hits the cutting KJ Martin for the dunk right at the rim. Alpu's just out there having fun, man. And that's the thing, is when this group of young guys play unselfishly, they look so good. Like it has to start at the top, right? It starts with Kevin and it starts with Jalen at the top. And it really does start with Kevin, right? Because if Kevin plays unselfishly and kind of plays within the flow of the offense and really looks to get other guys involved, then I feel like that just kind of trickles down to the rest of the roster. And you start seeing that, like even Jalen, playing unselfishly, right? Looking for guys, in the pick and roll, right? Finding, lofting the ball over the top, or those little pocket passes to Alperen Sengun on the roll, or hitting KJ Martin over the top of the defense to where KJ can then, take that quick, power dribble and elevate, or that quick 1-2 step and elevate at the rim and get to that little kind of teardrop or kiss it off the glass like he likes to do in the pick and roll. And then once those guys are being unselfish, then you get guys like, Alperen Sengun and Jabari Smith Jr. being unselfish, right? Guys are looking to make the extra pass, the extra read. And I really felt like it was just so infectious across the starting lineup in this game, where guys were sharing the basketball. The ball movement looked good. There were very few possessions where things really felt like they kind of stagnated and got where you had, I guess, it felt like there were very few bad offensive possessions in this game. By and large, I felt like the majority of this game, the Rockets were moving the ball well. They got really high quality shots, a lot of possessions out of this game. I'd say probably about 80% or so of this game I felt really good about. Even if the shots weren't going in, I felt good about the offense that these guys were generating. And a way to take a look at that, right, is the Rockets have done a pretty horrendous job generating three-point opportunities as of late, right? They've had a lot of games where they're only generating, 20 or something three-point attempts, or in the low 30s of three-point attempts. They generated 44 three-point attempts in this game. It was fantastic seeing them just attack, slice up the Bulls defense, and then generate those wide open looks on the perimeter. And it was coming from the starters. Even the bench unit was doing a good job generating some, offensive opportunities. Just top down, the Rockets as a team did a really, really good job. And that all stems from that big three, right? Jalen, KPJ, and Sengun, and how those three all collectively played together and played off of one another offensively. We've seen Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun develop and establish this really good two-man game between the two of them. Hopefully this game is that building block for Alperen Sengun and Kevin Porter Jr., where those two can realize that they can start playing off of one another, right? Where KPJ, some of his shots, right, were, catch and shoot opportunities generated by Alperen Sengun, because he gets the ball, and when he gets the ball, he commands a double team, right? Or he's going to get to the free throw line, or he's going to get a bucket. He's just that talented. He's a very reliable offensive force. And so having a reliable offensive force like that, somebody who can be so insanely efficient, right? 10 of 12 from the floor, 4 of 4 at the free throw line, a ridiculous 25 points on 12 shots is absolutely absurd. Being able to rely on that and kind of buoy the Rockets offense and their kind of offensive identity and the template for how they can succeed, being able to balance more of the offense with Alperen Sengun while also still relying on Jalen and KPJ being your dynamic guards who are going to still spearhead the offense, still get the most shots on the team. This game is the template for how the Rockets should approach every game moving forward from here. There shouldn't ever be a game where Alperen Sengun plays less than 30 minutes. The three-man center lineup needs to be deaded expeditiously. It needs to stop. There is zero reason for Bruno Fernando to be playing minutes ahead of Alperen Sengun or Bruno Fernando at this point. It just doesn't matter, right? Kevin Porter Jr. has shown that he can have chemistry with Alperen Sengun, and those two need to get on the same page. And we've seen it. We saw it in this game. We can see it again moving forward. KPJ does not need Bruno to be successful. And Bruno Fernando does not provide you the defense that Garuba does. He doesn't provide you the offensive versatility that Sengun does. All Bruno provides you is
lob threat.
That's it. He gives you that one thing.
Lob threat.
And that's it. And sometimes you can expose a defense, right? In some matchups, it may work. But to me, it's not worthwhile anymore when you have two talented big men who look as good as they do in Alperen Sengun and Usman Garuba to be sacrificing their minutes on a game-by-game basis, on a nightly basis, for Bruno Fernando for that one skill that he brings to the table. Doesn't make any sense to me. So I would much rather see the center rotation, those minutes exclusively belong to Alperen Sengun and Usman Garuba moving forward. Give Alp 30 to 32 minutes a night. Give Garuba 16 to 18 minutes a night. And I will be ecstatic with those two guys holding down the fort at the 5 spot, and maybe situationally some minutes for Jabari Smith Jr. at the 5 if the matchup makes sense for it. But look, love Bruno Fernando. He's a great dude. Talent, he's a good player. I just don't think there's a spot for him on this team based on how good those other two guys have been. So with that, last thing that I've got here, KJ Martin, productive off the bench, 10 points, 3 boards. Kind of a quiet night compared to what we're used to out of KJ Martin. And then Tari Eason also had himself, a strong night off the Rockets bench. 9 points on 2 of 3 shooting, was 4-4 at the charity stripe, was aggressive. Only 2 rebounds for Tari, but he did have 1 assist, 1 steal, and 1 block in just 17 minutes of run. So, kind of Tari just doing Tari things, right? Filling up the stat sheet where he can. And then Ty Washington did miss all 3 of his shots, did have a turnover, but he had a rebound, he had a couple of assists, and he had a couple steals in his 8 minutes off the Rockets bench. So hopefully this is the trend moving forward where Ty Washington is able to, get those backup point guard minutes. But for the Rockets moving forward, man, I don't need to see any more Bruno Fernando minutes, and I really don't need to see any more Garrison Matthews minutes either. I think the Rockets could very easily rely on a 9-man rotation of just the Goon Squad off the bench plus Ty Washington. Those 4 guys would be my go-to rotation off the Rockets bench, and I'd be content with that. And honestly, maybe at this point, after his stint down with the RGV Vipers, maybe you give Josh Christopher a little bit of that run in place of Garrison Matthews. I know he's not the shooter that Garrison Matthews is, but if he's able to go out there and, I guess just, not tunnel vision, right? If he goes out there and if he plays within the flow of the offense and he looks to not be passive with the basketball out there, but just, hustle, right? Go out there, play good defense, be in the right spots offensively, take his wide open shots, right? Play within the flow of the offense. Give Josh a chance, right? Like I there's not really I don't see anything that Garrison Matthews has done this season to warrant minutes over Josh Christopher, other than the fact that Gary Bird's a shooter and Josh kind of isn't. So, but at this point, maybe you could shake things up that way and get Josh back in the rotation that way, get him 5 or 6 minutes a night, kind of playing that wing spot, that 3 spot that Gary Bird is playing right now. But I think that we saw a lot of really positive developments from this Rockets game against the Bulls. It's nice for them to be able to pick up a win, and it's nice for them to be able to get a win on the first night of the back-to-back, because going up against arguably the best team in the entire NBA against the Boston Celtics on the second night of a back-to-back is going to be absolutely brutal. So prepare to potentially be in store for a, like a 20-point blowout maybe. I would not get your hopes up for this game against the Celtics, but with that, that's going to do it for today's episode. As always, appreciate you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.